Today, we're going to be joined by two of our team members from Chagalani Coffee, which is our Uganda sister operation. Really appreciate them taking the time. It is, I believe, 8 p.m. there-ish.
Yeah.
So I appreciate you taking time out of your evening to join us. A couple points of business to talk about that I will also cover later. I'm going to be doing an Instagram cupping next week of some bestsellers and blend components. Please join me for that. We are also getting a bunch of coffees in right now. Make sure you're checking the new arrivals in the afloat page. I know I'm very excited about a pink bourbon from Finca Las Flores that there's a tasting note that's pink lemonade and honeysuckle. I am jazzed to taste that coffee. Be thinking about your holiday offerings now, because shipping, we all know shipping gets tricky this time of year. With that being said, I want to do some introductions. So this is where we go around the room. Again, I'm Jen. I handle the West Coast for Genuine Origin. Been working in coffee for a little over 21 years and almost 4 years at Go now. So next up will be Cindy.
Hey guys, Cindy here. I am the Southern Sales Manager for Genuine Origin, coming at you from Houston, Texas, and proud to say I'm just about to celebrate my 2nd year with Genuine Origin.
Woohoo! Woohoo. All right. Thank you, Cindy. Johnny, you are next.
Hi everyone, I'm Johnny Rowland. I've been in Uganda for the last 5 years working in the coffee industry. I started out 5 years ago with an organization called Agri-Evolve, which I started in the Renzuris, and we'll be talking about in the presentation. We always worked closely in partnership with Chagalani, and now I actually work as the Assistant General Manager for Chagalani.
Excellent. Thank you. And Ted, you are next.
Hi, my name is Ted Mably. I am Operations Coordinator at Chagalani Coffee. I started my career in coffee in Addis Ababa, working in an export office for a specialty importer there. And last year I joined Chagalani in Uganda, and I've been here just over a year. Operations, I guess, is everything from exports to internal operations, and I also look after a bit of the specialty coffee sales and marketing.
Excellent. Well, thank you both so much for the work you've put into this and for joining us today. And as always, behind the scenes, Rob, do you want to say a couple words?
Hi, everybody.
So Rob's making sure everything works. A couple of notes to go over. If you are looking at the screen, you can see there is a Q&A. Please feel free to submit questions. We may not always get to them immediately, but we generally find time to work them into the conversation or have them at the end of the presentation. So, and keep in mind, you can always catch up with Cindy, Jay, and myself after the fact if you have more questions, and we're happy to find more info for you. With that being said, let's jump into this video, Johnny. If Johnny or Ted, you want to give us a little bit of an intro on what we're seeing.
Ted, do you want to intro the video?
Yeah, the video was made, this was produced in March last year. So we're kind of, actually, I think it was February. So it covered the very end of the Mount Elgon harvest and kind of start of very early fly crop, and then it had beginning of the Renzuri fly crop on it. So it was basically just made as a quick 1 minute video so we could show everyone in a minute what we do in our relatively vastly sized company. So it's mainly the first half of the video, you can see the Renzuris, you'll see the washing stations we have there, Kasinga and Bugoya. And then the second half is focused in Mount Elgon and around the parchment purchasing in the Mbale units. So, yeah.
Okay,
There you go, Johnny.
enjoy.
That was really beautiful. Thank you for sharing that. And then I think from here, if y'all want to give us a little bit of an overview of Uganda coffee operations, we would love to know more.
Okay, great. So, so we are Chagalane Coffee. We will give you this introduction to Uganda if you don't know much about it. We're just north of Lake Victoria, around 42 million population, but it's a very young population. Most people under 25. Then, yeah, other than agricultural, coffee, tea, cotton, tobacco, fish, tourism is also very high in Uganda. We have fantastic safaris and gorillas and chimpanzees and everything. So it's a great place to visit. And then let's move on to the coffee there, Johnny. Oh, here you go. Here's this is actually an interesting map. So here you can see all of Volcafe's origin operations with the yellow beans. You can see us, Uganda, right there in the center of the map. So that's where we are. The surrounding East Africa is we've got offices in Addis Ababa, Nairobi, and Dar es Salaam as well. Okay. So Uganda, as much as Ethiopia is the birthplace of Arabica coffee, Uganda is the birthplace of Robusta, and is actually Africa's largest exporter. Ethiopia is a much larger grower as a whole, but around 40% is consumed internally. So that leaves Uganda at around 4.5 million bags, roughly, each year. But as you can see, it's much higher Robusta production against Arabica. And yeah, the next one. So Chagalane Coffee, we are Uganda's oldest coffee exporter, founded in 1992, just after the liberation of the coffee industry here. So now we cover roughly around 20% of Uganda's total coffee export, which I believe, although there isn't actually any solid, strong data, puts us at, I think, the largest exporter on the continent. So we have about a 70% Robusta, 30% Arabica export ratio, working around 14,000 certified households. Now, these certified households are mainly delivering cherries to us and certified parchment for Uds, RFA, CP, Volcafe Way. We've got eight wet mills, and 2 major dry mills, which we will focus in a little bit.
So coffee production,
Johnny
we start with. We start with a Robusta, which, as Ted said, we do about 70% Robusta. It varies depending on year to year. Some years we can actually go 60-40, depending on how we see the market, how we see the opportunities. Robusta production is mainly around the central region of Uganda, so regions which are closest to Kampala. So logistically, it makes it easier for us. And we buy what's known as FAQ. So we typically buy from middlemen, from traders who buy from the farmers. All the Robusta is basically naturally processed, so picked from the trees, sun-dried by the farmers, and then held at hulling stations. It's a totally liberalized market, so farmers are free to sell and trade with whoever they like. We then set up mobile buying units all over the country. So on the slide, you've got those 5 names. Those are locations where we have mobile units. We have staff there with quality controllers, unit managers who will buy the FAQ from suppliers, from middlemen. And it's on an outturn basis. So we receive coffee, we analyze it, and we pay a price according to the quality. Then that coffee is all transported to our central dry mill in Kampala, where it's dried and processed, ready for export. We've just started developing quite a large, our farmer support programs have always been focused on the Arabica value chains, but we've recently started an Uds RFA certified value chain in Robusta as well, and actually Volcafe Way as well. So that's in our Masaka area, and it will get to about 5,000 farmers in the next few years. So Mount Elgon, which is in the east, Mount Elgon is the region that borders with Kenya. Chagalani been working there for about 15 years now, so a long time. It's the area of the country, it's one of 3 Arabica regions. We have Mount Elgon, we have West Nile, and we have the Ruwenzori. Now, Mount Elgon is the area that's received the most investment, the most attention from exporters like ourselves, probably the most support from donors as well. It generally produces about 20,000 tons of Arabica each year. It's all of that is washed. So there's a combination of centrally processed coffee where the farmers or suppliers sell cherries to washing stations, not only ours, but our other exporters as well. And then sorry, I see something about Robusta questions.
You're good. Keep on going.
I keep going. Okay. So yeah, we get cherry can be delivered directly to central washing stations, including our that's ours, but also other people who've built mills in the region. Also, a lot of probably 80% of the coffee is actually home processed. So it's processed by groups with hand pulpers on the farms, generally in groups, not at individual farmer level because the farms are too small. And then they sell it in parchment form. They typically sell wet parchment, so not dry parchment. It'll be 16% moisture usually. We then buy that as wet parchment. We dry it in our dry mill in Mbali. And then again, we send it to Namanve for milling. The cherries, we have 5 washing stations in Mount Elgon where we buy cherries. We then pulp and ferment the cherries. We have a few different types of fermentation. But again, that's where we get our best fully washed coffees from in Mbali. And again, that coffee will also go to our dry mill in Mbali and then from there to Kampala. We have a large sustainability team in Mount Elgon. We have over 60 staff dedicated to our farmer support services in Mbali, and we have a variety of programs, including demo plots, youth teams, gender programs. We have a child education project as well. So yeah, these are our washing stations. We have 5 washing stations and then parchment groups as well. The parchment groups work similar to the Robusta units where we have little stores where we buy coffee. Again, with a QC to analyze, and we pay basis the quality. So the Ruwenzori, this is a more recent development. As I said earlier, I started in the Ruwenzoris in 2015, and at that point, Chagalani had no operations in the Ruwenzoris at all. They were typically buying drugas from large middlemen in Kampala. Drugas are a very low quality coffee, typically trading at -30, sometimes even -40 when the market's up. At the moment with the market where it is, I think they're -25. But yeah, a poor quality coffee that's basically a result of poor post-harvest handling. It's got nothing to do with the potential of the coffee or the trees or the landscape. It's all to do with the post-harvest practices. So we saw an opportunity to go in there in 2015 and start working with farmers to pick red cherries, to sell us the cherries so that we could centrally process and develop a much higher quality. We've focused very much on naturals there because that is what the region is known for. So that's where our top quality Uganda naturals come from. Though we've also started doing some fully washed, as in Mount Elgon. But even without, 90% of the coffee there is still being traded as drugas. So we've got a lot of work to do, but we now have 2 very large washing stations that are doing about 3,000 tons of cherries each. The Ruwenzoris, we have quite an interesting sourcing model because it's a very complex region to work in. The roads, the infrastructure is very poor. So we have what we call a promoter farmer structure, which is like I'd say it's a lead farmer, but it's like a small middleman, someone who is part of a group of farmers, but is trading coffee. So they buy the coffee from the farmers, they sell it to us. We work with them. We're actually starting to get them more involved in our farmer services as well. So inspecting farmers for certification, training farmers. We've got them doing seedling nurseries, agro-input stores, etc. And what you can see there in the photo is one of our buying stations. So a community buying station run by a promoter farmer. This is where the cherries are delivered to by the farmers. And then we send our trucks there, collect the cherries, take them to our central washing station, process the coffee, and then again it all goes to Namanve in Kampala where it's milled, ready for export. Namanve was built in 2014. It's a huge dry mill capable of doing about 40 tons per hour. And we have two lines, both an Arabica. We have an Arabica line and a Robusta line. Ted, I don't know if you want to say anything more about Namanve.
No, not too much more. I mean, all of our coffee passes through here, so it's like a central exit route, I guess. It's where all of our exports leave, and it's where our head office is so based. Right. So yeah, the export operations. Yeah. So I mean, all of Uganda's coffee goes through Mombasa, which has proven to be a bit difficult in the last year, as I'm sure everyone can imagine. So in terms of logistical COVID-19 issues, which I was working quite closely with the logistics team over that period, I'd say that the main issue is all the East African borders closed. So at one point they were just simply shut. Then you were allowed to come through, but you had to have a COVID test. Now this is, back in, let's call it April. That was still out here. It was taking like 3-4 days for a result. And I think the longest queue we had at the Kenyan border was 120 kilometers of two lanes of trucks. People sleeping on the side of the road for like 6 days as they gradually shifted forward. So this was the main issue. And then this then led to this huge lack of trucks and containers, because Uganda, coming from Mombasa, is a trade route also to Congo and Burundi. So a lot of the containers that were coming through weren't even destined for Uganda. They were just passing through. So the biggest issue we found was actually getting the trucks or the containers. Sometimes it was an annoying one was there, not the other. We had trucks with drivers who were able to go through Kenya, but then we didn't have any containers. And obviously everyone has their own, or not obviously maybe, but when people book coffee on an FOB basis, they usually have their own shipping line that they want to use as a service contract number. So it's not as black and white as saying, oh, here's a container, we will ship it. It was specific people wanting specific containers, and we had people waiting weeks just so they could get a container of a particular shipping company, which was relatively stressful. But yeah, as the testing got quicker and the governments got better at organizing it, it managed to smooth over a bit. And now the queues are more back to normal. But it was definitely, export-wise, it was a terrible year. But on a positive note, looking to the future, I'd say that, Chaglani, we're a big powerhouse of Robusta. So, we might have seen on an earlier slide, we've just rolled out our own certification, who's RFA certifications. That's fantastic. Now, like, our big focus is here for the next couple of years would be to increase our Arabica volumes. We're currently the largest Arabica exporter in Uganda, but we would like to be that largest by a further point. So that would also include bringing up the overall quality of the Arabica. Johnny was talking about Drugas earlier, and you've got big issues as well. So focusing on like higher premium qualities, focusing more on some special preparations, which we've been doing a bit in the past. But I don't know, Jen, if you want to talk about that now, or if it's a question that'll come up.
No, I think if you want to get into that a little bit, people are asking why Uganda produces more Robusta. If it's why it's lower quality, probably lower altitudes playing into that. I know I can speak to Stephen's question about Go offering Uganda Robustas. We, QC and management, have cupped Uganda Robustas in the past. We haven't found one yet that quite fits our program, but it's definitely something we're open to. So it is possible in the future. But yeah, Ted or Johnny, if you want to speak to why Uganda produces higher amounts of Robusta, and a little bit about what impacts the quality.
Yeah, so the why does Uganda have a higher percentage of Robusta? It's the altitude issue and the landscape of Uganda. Basically, we have 3 mountainous areas. That's in the east, Mount Elgon. It's in the west, the Rwenzori, and in the northwest, in the West Nile. Those are the higher altitude areas. There's also a little bit in the southwest, close to the Rwanda border, but it does a little bit of Arabica, but very small. But the vast area of Uganda is around 1,000 meters above sea level, so it's a bit too low for Arabica really to do well, and so it's much more suitable for Robusta production. Arabica typically starts about 1,200 and above. The Drugas, the quality. Yeah, it's a good question. Druga stands for dried Ugandan Arabica. So the Drugas are processed a little bit like a Robusta in that the cherries are picked, put on the floor to dry, and then after that they're held on a hulling machine and sold as FAQ. So the suppliers are selling beans, usually wet, to be honest, at about 16% moisture. But the reason the quality is low starts with harvesting. Because it's an area that does not receive much investment, or even farmers not got much of an attachment with coffee. Coffee was brought in by the colonials across the whole of Uganda. So across the whole of Uganda, it's a challenge that the farmers have not grown up with a passion for coffee. In the east, this has slowly changed because there's been more and more investment, more development in the industry, so people see opportunities. In the Rwenzoris, and until we started a few years ago, there's really no other market other than Drugas. So you sell to a middleman or you don't sell at all. It's really just one option. And it means, farmers tend to strip the trees. They pick underripe cherries, sometimes even a month before they're ripe. And then the drying conditions are poor. They don't use tarpaulins. They're dried on the floor. They're stored in poor conditions. And you end up with quite a musty sort of, low grade, basically. So it's a huge opportunity to turn that quality around, which is part of what we've been doing. There's about 25,000 tons coming out of the area. So it's a big volume, a big portion of it's actually the biggest percentage of Uganda's Arabica.
Wow.
And Johnny, I think the interesting point you and I actually discussed the other day is that to add on to your point about the coffee being brought in by colonial government is also like, it's not a crop that they see. So like most smallholder farmers in Uganda, they all growing bananas, they're growing cassava, maybe a little bit of onions, tomatoes. Like there's a lot of crops, and all the other crops are sold locally, traded locally, or consumed by the household. But coffee is not, and it's a total absent product, and always has been, because Uganda, although tea is drunk widely here, it's just not a coffee drinking nation, especially in the way that Ethiopia is. So I think that's another kind of interesting point about the farmers accepting it as a crop and seeing the opportunity, because it's just taken away, especially if they haven't put much effort into the production. So it just is seen as or was hopefully seen as just a kind of quick, easy money maker crop. Little investment, little return, I think.
So how are we Sorry.
Oh yeah, go ahead.
How are we convincing farmers to treat their coffee better? It's again, a great question. There are 2 approaches we have with farmers in the field. The first one is on quality, because to add value at farmer level, the quickest thing you can do is change their quality. You improve their quality, you pay a better price. They get more money, they see better value out of coffee, they're more interested in coffee, they might spend money on treating the coffee better. So when we go into a region like we went into the Rwenzoris, the key thing is the price we're paying for cherries. When you look at the price we pay for cherries versus the equivalent value of Druga, we're actually paying the farmer double in cherry form than they get for Druga. And yet with Druga, they have to dry the coffee, hull the coffee, incur those processing costs, and well, not really costs because they're doing it at home mostly, but time, labor, etc. When we buy fresh cherries, we're paying the equivalent value of double, and that's because we're able to take those cherries and produce a very high quality coffee as opposed to a -30 coffee. As well as price, it's a lot of awareness. We do radio shows where we do talk shows. So we have a big field team, about 30 staff. We do weekly talk shows on the radio. We have SMS marketing. We have trucks actually that we put speakers on the back of. We've actually we've had a local artist write some songs because Ugandans are very musical and they like listening to music. So we have some music that's songs all about coffee and how they should pick and sell coffee to us and the prices, etc. So those trucks drive up with speakers and the DJ and then some of our stuff, and then they get everyone in the trading centers in the villages together, and they have like a big, it's like a big marketing drive on what we're trying to promote and what it can do for the farmer.
If you ever get video of that, will you please send it to us? We would love to see that. Please send it our way.
We have videos and photos, so I'm very happy to share those with you. I will make that an action point, and then you can share
that.
Well, yeah, marketing is a very big thing.
I want to jump on something you're saying too, talking about awareness and pricing. And, the thing that I'll say to kind of answer these other couple of questions in the chat is, if you want to show support for this and support improving this quality and these farmers, buy these coffees. That's how you show your support. You buy these coffees, and through that, like, we're going to get into this in more detail a little bit later, but that's part of Volt Cafe Way. That's part of of what Volt Cafe Way and AgriEvolve are doing. And so that's the best way for you to support that. We're talking about kind of some other ideas behind the scenes, but that's definitely, if you want to continue to do this and make sure these coffees keep getting better, which, having been at Genuine Origin now for almost 4 years, I have seen our Uganda quality continue to increase. And in fact, we still have about 85 boxes of the Renzori Natural, which is delicious. So that's the best way to support that. Okay, that is my soapbox.
Very key point. That the best support for the farmer is for us to be able to buy their coffee at a good price. Obviously, once we've got them earning more money from better quality, then we start encouraging them to take better care of the coffee, better care of the trees, replanting if the trees are too old or the wrong variety, stamping where it's necessary. But you can't do that if farmers are not engaged, and they're not, if they're seeing such poor returns from their coffee, they're really not going to be interested in trying to invest more to produce more. So a lot of people think that dealing with the low production is easy, but it really, for me, starts with changes in quality and making investments in getting the farmers to earn more money from quality.
Yeah. So I wanted to dig into some of this a little bit more. I can say, before I started at Genuine Origin, I was not familiar with Uganda coffee at all. And at that point, I'd already been in the industry for like 17 years. But I feel like I've seen awareness and quality continue to spread. But let's talk a little, like, Chugulani, AgriEvolve. What's the relationship? How are you working together? How is that impacting Uganda coffee?
So yeah, when we started in 2015, like I said, I started the organization AgriEvolve. I came from a farming background in the UK, studied agriculture. My parents had lived in Uganda back in the 80s. So I came to the region with my dad. I wanted to work in agriculture. I wanted to work in a value chain where I could add value to smallholder farmers. So anything where I could use my skills to either opening up new markets to farmers, helping to improve productivity and profitability at farm level. So when I started this business, Chagulani and myself got talking very early on, because they had no one in the Renzoris in the region, and they thought it was a great opportunity to form a partnership and let AgriEvolve implement on the ground, and Chagulani would export the coffee, market the coffee, and finance the operation. So that's really how it started. So since then, together we've developed a supply chain in the Renzori that has 2 wet mills with a capacity of 50 tons each, to answer the question I see on the chat.
Thank you.
In Mount Elgon, the wet mills are a bit smaller, but we have more of them. We've got about 5 wet mills with 20-ton capacity each. So I would say the promotion, AgriEvolve being there, it's very much about developing the reputation amongst the community as the #1 partner for farmers to work with on coffee, and that's part of Chagalani's ethos upcountry all over Uganda. We're not just an exporter. We're not a buyer in Kampala. We are the exporter with the biggest presence in all upcountry regions for both Arabica and Robusta. Capacity, I mean, per day, 50 tons per day, and 20 tons per day for Mount Elgon.
Thank
to answer
you.
that question.
No, go ahead.
So yeah, as Ted was saying, if you've got a lot of farmers who don't have much attachment to coffee, there's been a lot of promotion, not just by ourselves, but even the Uganda Coffee Development Authority, on creating a positive atmosphere around coffee. Many farmers even used to believe that coffee was something that the colonial were using to make bullets. So back in the 60s when coffee was being planted, people were not even aware what coffee was for. So trying to create a positive atmosphere on what coffee is and what it can add for the farmers is a very important part of creating change at farmer level.
Wow. One of the things that also came up during your presentation was the buying stations. And I remember reading in some of our background info that you've set up these buying stations around for people to bring their coffee to. How accessible is that compared to the regional mills? How has that opened up the number of producers and the amount of coffee that small producers are able to move?
Yeah, it's really important because particularly in the Rwenzoris, the road networks are very poor. Obviously, with being bordering Congo, there's been a lot of instability in the region. So there's been very little development of infrastructure. So farmers have to, and this is why jugas are still predominantly produced. If you think about it, cherries are heavy, they weigh a lot, they have a lot of moisture. So when you take cherries and you dry them for about 2 days, they half in weight and they half in volume. So if you're a farmer who's up in the hills with a poor road and you have to carry that coffee on your back to sell it, you don't want to be carrying cherries every day or every other day or even every week. You want to get the coffee as light as possible. So that's why you have so much home processed coffee, because of the transport, the infrastructure. So our buying stations are a way of trying to open up the market to more farmers, because there's a lot of farmers in hard to reach areas that even if they wanted to sell cherries to us, it's totally impractical for them to do it. So we've used that to open up our market to a lot of farmers in hard to reach areas. We've also used donkeys. We've introduced donkeys into the region. We did a trial. We're doing a trial at the moment with about 20 donkeys working from a couple of different buying stations to help bring cherries down. We are using motorbikes where we can. So lots of different initiatives to try and make it easier for the farmer to access our market.
Wow.
That's incredible. So this is just incredible learning all about Uganda and how you guys are working on some new things. And we've heard that you guys are doing some experimentation with fermentations. So can you tell us a little bit about that, what you guys have learned, what you're seeing?
Yeah, so I mean, over the last year, we were working with another company on a special preparation project called Pura Sepa, which sadly is not happening anymore. But we have our own plans because it was a specific time project. But that was a great learning opportunity for Chagalani in terms of the production of special preparation. So we had big steel fermentation tanks. I'm trying to think, what would you call it, Johnny? The big tank? Just the big tank, I guess.
Best way I can describe it, because from a farming background, is like a big milk tank.
Yeah. It's giant, and so we still have these, and what we were doing with these other projects was that we had different preparations to work with, but we were using a special how would I describe it, like microbial bacterial fermentation process. So it actually had like a special compound that was added to the coffee. Now we did carbonic maceration in the large tank by adding that. So that's essentially where we're putting the coffee in the cherries. The carbon dioxide from the fermentation is just smashing the pressure down and creates a pretty funky profile. Then we were working on a fully washed version, which also that was added into the washing tanks. And we had the Naturalis, which is where we converted some sprayers and we were spraying them down with the juice, I guess, which was creating this really great fermentation. Then, and we also did a skin contact. Now, like I said, this came from us working with a company that we did in Mount Elgon and the Renzeries. Working with a company that, as far as I'm aware, it's not going to be carrying on anymore with this company. So, whilst they actually own the brand name of what we were doing, but it's been a great learning experience. I think Johnny would agree with our with the production teams to see that and to see the the qualities that can come out from that. So I think moving forward, we did some experiments with honeys last year, which were very well received, although we did a very small batch. So we definitely want to be working more on honeys as a more common offering. Special fermentations, I mean, we still have these tanks, so we're looking at the anaerobic fermentation in there, also looking at getting kind of black plastic water tanks, and getting the cherries in there. Johnny might know a bit more about the preparation there that he's planning.
It's special prep's not easy. It's about a lot of experimenting, getting it wrong, and then learning from it. We've created some interest. We've created some very good coffees from special preps. We've also had a few disasters, so it's very much about learning.
It's risky for sure.
Yeah, but it's definitely something we will push forward on a small scale. It's never going to be the main part of our business, and I think it's something that going forward we start as we produce a coffee and then share it with clients and get their input. It's about us being able to produce it to a certain spec on demand. So if a client says, look, we really like that particular special prep, can we have it again next year? That's where we hope to get to. We don't really want to be producing random lots that we don't know where the market is.
For sure.
Especially at a time like now when, cafes, with COVID, cafes closed, that kind of market makes us particularly nervous at the moment. So this year I've already, we will likely do some honeys this year, but beyond that, it's probably not going to happen until next year.
That's exciting.
Yeah, for sure. We're always into weird coffees, but again, we aren't the ones buying the coffee, so
it's an expensive.
Yes, exactly.
But I was going to say also one thing that we're looking forward to a lot is, one of the benefits of being in a group like Volcafe is that, there's a wealth of knowledge in different origins that we can also tap into. We can learn, we can speak with our colleagues in Guatemala, our colleagues in Colombia, our colleagues in Brazil, Kenya, anywhere really, and learn from them. Fortunately, Volcafe we are relatively friendly to one another within the group. So it's it's an exciting opportunity to move forward and learn from other origins, what works well for them, how can we do this. So
we are very lucky to have that network. I think a lot about sustainability, and y'all have heard me say this. Every time I say sustainability, I cringe internally a little bit because it means nothing if you don't qualify it. But I think a lot about why I came to Genuine Origin, and what the work Volcafe Way was doing was really a big draw for me. And I know it's been a struggle to implement Volcafe Way in Africa, but Uganda really seems to be our shining star for that. So can you tell us about how Volcafe Way is going, and like what's working, what you're learning, and maybe what has been a little bit more difficult?
Yeah, sure. So I agree with you. Sustainability is a great. We talk. It's very much a big part of our business, but I'm not a big fan of the word itself because for me, we don't have a sustainability department. Our entire business has to be sustainable, and it's part of everything we do. So we've had Chagalani's had farmer support operations for at least the last 10 years. I think it goes back a bit beyond that, and that's always involved certification of coffee, and that involves working very closely with the farmers, because to certify coffee, you have to do household inspections of each farmer, which, it's not like you're inspecting an estate with containers of coffee. You have to inspect every single farmer that produces a few hundred kilos. We're talking 5 bags on average in Uganda per hectare. Sorry, not per hectare, five bags on average per farmer. So the production is very small, which means you need a lot of people to certify the kind of volumes that we're doing. So our focus has often in the past been about certification. Now we see the industry moving in a direction where it's not all about certification. It's more about what's actually being done in the field, not just ticking a box that we're UTZ or RFA certified. It's more about, yes, we want to be certified, but we also want to know exactly what impact is had. And I'd say we are very good at creating that impact and also communicating it and showing it. Volcafe Way incorporates many things. It's one of Volcafe Way's core elements is farming as a business, which obviously is all about how we manage our coffee trees to get more money from them, which, as I've said a bit earlier on, in a country like Uganda, where you've got very small holder farmers who don't really have an attachment to coffee, who have got such low production, it's very difficult for them to be convinced to, say, invest in a bag of fertilizer, or to invest in replanting half their farm or planting a new farm. So that side of Volcafe Way is not easy, but we've made a lot of progress in Mount Elgon, especially, and other regions. We're still focusing, I think, on quality more. But yeah, for me, Volcafe Way is not just, although the core element is farming as a business, for me, Volcafe Way is about everything that we're doing to impact the lives of the farmers that we buy from. And that includes promoting farming as a business. It includes opening up new markets to sell better qualities. It includes some of the social projects we do on gender, on child education. For me, all of that is part of our Volcafe Way offering. And it's very important to how we source coffee.
Yeah, I think we would all agree with that. It takes a holistic approach for sure. Cindy, I think you had a question.
Yes. So some of the information I sometimes share when I'm talking with customers is about the award that Chagalani received back in 2018 from the Rainforest Alliance. Can you guys share a little bit about that, and how has it impacted your work?
Johnny, I'll let you take this again because it was before my time.
So this award was to recognize, like you say, from Rainforest, it was to recognize the work that Chagalani was doing, which was unique at for the region, for the work it was doing specifically on child education. And what I mean by this is we were working in partnership, and still are, with a local NGO to work with our coffee farmers to help get children who are not in school back to school. So when the issue we have in Uganda is not child labor that you would commonly get in other origins, our issue in Uganda is poverty. So it's an issue that many households cannot afford to send their kids to school, or they can afford to send them for half the year and then they drop out. Then they have to take the whole year again, or they get to exams and then they can't pay. So the school refuses to let them sit exams. In Uganda, schools are mostly private, and you have to pay for them. And even the government ones, you have to pay for uniforms, books, a few fees, even if the school itself is supposed to be free. So because we have access to all these farmers, and we have a field team working in the field every day with farmers, and we have to inspect or assess farmers in order to pass certification, we have a great tool to be able to identify households where children are not in school. We're then able to work with the local community and work with the NGO to help that household form plans to get their children back into school. Now, from our point of view, we tackle more the economic aspects, which is the value of the coffee that we can buy from them, how we increase their income from coffee, etc. The NGO tackles it from more of a social perspective. Now, this kind of partnership and this kind of work was not being done at all in Uganda. Chagalani was the first to be doing this, and it was led by Anna Kafumo, our sustainability manager, and she was very happy to go over to the States and receive this award from Rainforest. It's a very proud moment for her and our whole team. To be recognized for doing this. And basically what Rainforest were recognizing is that Chagalani was not just achieving certification, it was going above and beyond what it needs to do to pass certification. So doing things that actually create real impact, as you know, not just ticking the box that we're certified.
That's
Beautiful
awesome.
work.
And some of you might remember the very, very first webinar we ever did was for Uganda, and Annika was on that presentation, which I believe is still on our YouTube channel. If not, we'll find it. But if you ever miss any of these, you can go back to our YouTube and SoundCloud and check them out there. So now the question I told you that everyone asks in every webinar, which is about COVID, and you got into that a little bit. I know we've also heard concerns from other origin operations about availability of containers, availability of people for labor. So how has COVID impacted things? Can you give me like a little bit of a timeline? I mean, a brief timeline, but like what things looked like earlier this year to now?
Yeah, so I guess we could do it in two parts, because Johnny was much more involved in the purchasing and production side during COVID, and I was based in the head office looking after the logistics. So, I mean, basically Uganda has actually done really well with COVID. We've still, I mean, the testing is a bit, you're never really sure of the figures, but, you know, it's you can just see there's not people lining up outside hospitals in the streets. So we had a total lockdown. I mean, borders shut at the beginning of April or the end of March. Then there was obviously the concern. We still had a huge amount of shipments to do. So we were trying to work out what was going to happen next. And then they banned all public and private transport and shut all businesses down, closed all factories. Literally, I mean, you remember, Johnny, the transport was with half an hour's notice. I mean, if you were in the wrong side of the country, you were going to stay. And they did it about 10 p.m. So then suddenly no one could get to work. So then we had to find out ways, and it turned out you could actually go, if only one person was on a motorcycle, they could get to work. Then the government started issuing special passes for people in high caliber export and various other things that needed to continue to run the country. So various people got these stickers for their cars. Commercial vehicles are still allowed to travel, so we were able to. I used to have a truck, a container, come and pick me up in the morning to come to work, and then go. But that got stopped eventually. So that was a big problem. Then there was this rule that if you had a factory open, your staff had to sleep there. They weren't allowed to go in and out. But then that relaxed a bit. So we had about a week of serious shutdown. Then it eased, and we managed to continue production. Then from the head office side, like I say, our main issue, most people working from home. We had 3 months of travel ban. I worked from home for almost all that time. Very few people were able to get to the office. Fortunately, we use a huge amount of workers who live near the factory. So people were able to walk in. So it meant that, fortunately, and there's a huge amount of what people might call casual work in Uganda, which is, should we say, laborers who signed up with various agencies who can help out in factories and stuff. So the manpower wasn't such an issue, but it was definitely an issue to get like the people who had to actually run the factory, into the office. Then we had the logistics issue, which I touched on, which was, we finally started producing the coffee, but then we couldn't export it. And when you can't export the coffee, then your store gets full. And when your store gets full, then the other store up country gets full. And so that had a bit of a knock-on effect. That's all much better now. Like I say, it's very rare that we're having a logistical issue now. But Johnny will be able to give you a better idea than I from out in the Renzuris and in terms of mobilization of the coffee.
Yeah, look, the very key point is transport. Farmers typically move around on bikes, pickups, all sorts of modes of transport to sell and trade coffee. When you take that away, you have to, the whole value chain just grinds to a halt. So we provided a lot of additional transport during particularly in the fly season. So in the March, April, May season, that meant we put on, because government allowed transport for moving cargo. So we put on a lot of extra support for farmers to basically move their coffee around. But overall, I think it's a huge positive that we've been able to continue our sourcing operations throughout COVID. Throughout the year, it's definitely affected us, but it hasn't reduced our volumes. And most importantly for me is that it hasn't changed what we're doing in the field. Our farmer support teams are still working with farmers. They're still in the field. It did not bring to a halt all of our activities in the field, and that's very positive for me.
Wow. That's incredible. Cindy, you have the $64,000 question. Yes.
So the big question everybody wants to know, what can roasters expect for Uganda for 2021?
So coffee that we're producing this year for 2021?
Yes.
Okay, so we have a top Uganda natural Arabica that's being produced in the Rwenzuris. This coffee is actually, it's actually currently being sun-dried in our greenhouses. So within the next couple of weeks that will finish, and it will be on, it's due to be shipped in December. So it'll be, about as fresh as you can get, to be honest, in terms of main crop coffee. That coffee is coming from the Rwenzuris. We also have from the Rwenzuris a fully washed coffee. So this will be a coffee that's again processed at our central mills, where we take the cherries. We have a double fermentation. So we have a 12-hour dry fermentation, a 12-hour wet fermentation, and then we wash and grade the coffee. So there's some of that coming. And we're in discussions about doing a special honey process as well, which we've already done some of, and it's not. We're in discussions with the team at Go to see if we can send some of that as well. So three qualities.
Very exciting.
Cool. So that means probably for those of you playing along that we can expect those coffees to be in the East Coast warehouse probably around February, I would say. So stay tuned for those. If you cannot wait that long, there still is some Rwenzori Natural. I think we've got it. We do. I wrote it down. I checked. We have 74 boxes in the East Coast and 12 boxes in the West Coast. It also ships free. If you want to get real granular, that's just shy of 16 cents a pound you're saving. So again, that's the best way to support these programs, buy the coffee. That's why we do this. I love coffee. I love people. I want to support it. So that being said, sorry we could not get to all of the questions today. Y'all were really, really engaged, and it was great. If you have more questions, head over to the contact page on genuineorigin.com, and you can get in touch with Jay, Cindy, or myself. Jay is not on the call. He is our East Coast counterpart, but he's here watching. And we're happy to either get you in touch with someone who has the answers, or if we have resources, we will share them directly. Thank you both so much. We've got an exit survey that just popped up. Really appreciate you taking the time. I feel like Uganda deserves more attention. The work going on, the quality improvement, not to mention, like, if you haven't tried it, a washed Uganda is a really good blend component. It can function as a central or south really nicely. This year that the Mount Elgon Kapchor was so popular, we don't have it anymore. Little last bit of business. We do have another webinar scheduled for November 19th, and that's going to be with our Colombia operation. And then really exciting, we will have our first webinar about the DR Congo in December with Dirk, who used to run our Kenya operation, Taylor Winch, and is an incredible resource. So really excited for those. Those are all my notes for today. But again, Johnny, Ted, thank you so much. This is really enlightening, and we're glad to be able to share this with people. So thank you, Cindy. Thank you, Rob. Thank you, attendees. On that note, go drink some coffee. Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Thank you all for having us on.
Thank you.
Thanks, guys.
Bye.
Bye.
Bye.